Anyways, hello everyone, and welcome to our last session of today, which is hiring trends, kind of looking at the crystal ball. For those of you who don't know me as of yet, my name is Lori Conlon, and I run, what do? I run the Postdoc office in the Career Services Center here in the Office of Intramural Training and Education. And those of you who have been with us for the past 2 days have seen me a lot. So you can probably understand why I can't remember my own name almost at this point. We're really glad that you have come. This is a favorite talk that I have kind of created, thinking about what is happening and looking into the crystal ball of what is happening with hiring in all the different sectors. A few housekeeping notes as we get along. There is closed captioning being provided. So you can just go to the little more button, ... and you can turn on transcripts if that's something that you enjoy. Please ask me questions using the Q&A function here. Don't raise your hand. I don't know what to do with that. So please just ask questions using the Q&A, and we'll get to those towards the end of the talk. So that's all we have. Let's head into it. All of you are quite familiar at this point with the Career Symposium Whova page. Remember, you can always message people directly through this particular function. And there also is the community boards that are here. There's a lot of meetups that have started, definitely for tomorrow. I know 2 tomorrow that may be of interest is if you do want to do science at the NIH, one of my colleagues is hosting a meetup for that tomorrow. There's one for if you're interested in the graduate partnerships program, doing your graduates part or all of your graduate work here at the NIH. As always, these slides are already available to you within the Whova app. So just go underneath the agenda into this particular session and you can find the slides. Also, under that is a really amazing 34-page document about advice for you as applicants about trends, hiring, all the rest of that stuff from our speakers. And so I asked all the speakers before this whole thing started, what advice would you give for people who are looking to get hired? And so there's some really amazing advice. And I couldn't shove all of it into this talk. I took bits and pieces of it, but that document is available to you as well within the Whova app under today's event. Okay, great. So today we're going to talk a little bit about data on career outcomes that we have. So kind of what's happening in careers for biomedical scientists. We're going to talk about the current state of the job market based on different sectors. So we're going to talk about nonprofits, government, industry, and academics. Okay, so we're going to talk about all those different sectors and a little bit thinking about what's happening currently and where it's going to go. It's not going to be perfect because I really don't have a crystal ball, but it's as good as we're going to get. And then we're going to talk a little bit about making sure you're ready to be a competitive candidate. So there's this really cool new paper that just was published on career outcomes. And I'm really happy that these kind of papers are being published by some economists really looking at the data to really kind of think about what is happening with PhDs. They do all sectors. I'm obviously, because I'm the NIH, I'm much more interested in biomedical science careers, but they do every single sectors. So they looked at 9,000 STEM PhDs who graduated between 2000 and 2008, who are part of the survey of doctoral recipients. And one thing that is anybody who gets a degree in the United States has to report to the NSF that they have got their PhD. Then the NSF will take a longitudinal study of a subset of that population. So this particular paper is looking at that subset of the population, okay? So with that, the things that this paper particularly found was after the PhD was done, most common path for all PhDs in the United States was to go directly into non-academic positions, and then they would stay long-term in those non-academic positions. So this paper was really, I think it's called the Leaky Pipeline or whatever, something. It's what is a science, this is it. It's what is a traditional scientist's career? Evidence from the survey of earned doctoral recipients. The whole thing is there is no such thing as a pipeline, but like Sharon talked in her talk yesterday, we all have this like pedestal for a particular type of job. And we're thinking that if we don't do anything, if we do something else, we're not hitting that pedestal that we thought we were. But the data is showing us, absolutely showing us across the years that PhDs are going to multiple types of career paths. They also showed that only 29% of PhD holders across the board in STEM fields were tenure track faculty 7 to 9 years post PhD. So only about 29% of us will actually ever get to be that tenure track faculty. Everybody else is doing, that's why we have so many careers that we're focusing on in the Career Symposium, is because so many of us choose to do something else. And they did do an interesting component of this study, that there is a group of tenure track faculty that have come back into the faculty position from a non-academic position. So it's probably industry into tenure track faculty. So everyone always asks us, if I go to industry, can I come back? This data is showing that you can. This is taken from Science Magazine that did an editorial on the paper, because I found the figures a little bit easier to read. So this is some different paths to tenure. And what they're showing here is that in the biomedical sciences, which is again, my thing, PhDs in tenure track positions, 7 to 9 years post PhD, it's about, about 26, 27%. Whether that is from people who came in, did their postdoc in academics and stayed in academics, or people who kind of, the light blue is people who hopped out of academics and then came back. So about 26% of biomedical sciences PhDs actually are in the tenure track. Great, Lori, fine. What happens to the rest of the 75% of us? Well, we have data there too. So we've done some alumni data on different career outcomes. The first one that was really published was in 2012, and it was the NIH Biomedical Research Workforce Working Group Report. It was funded by Burroughs Wellcome Fund, and it was from the NIH. It's a little bit old, but the data is still really good. It's consistent with some data that's more recently. So the data that was published back in 2012, it's consistent with the data I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides. I did a data outcome of career outcomes from our NIH Intramural Research Program alumni database, and it matched that of the 2012 data. Now, the most recent data we have on career outcomes comes from my very good friends down at NIEHS, who have developed this amazing system to track postdocs across time. So this is from postdocs that left NIEHS between 2015 and 2019. They've tracked 1,100 postdocs. You can look at the data and slice it and dice it any which way you like. And I'm going to go through some of the data because I think it's really cool. But Tammy Collins and Hong Zhu, I cannot thank you enough for the work that you've done to really kind of put this out there so that all of us can look at career outcomes. So the first thing that they showed is that the different sectors that alumni are going to. So about 41% are going to academic institutions, 42% are going to for-profit or industry. So it's about a 50-50. Remember, in these academic institutions, it could be tenure track faculty or everything else from yesterday's talks, which was, academic support, research jobs that are non-faculty, teaching jobs that are non-tenure track, et cetera. So that is everything within the academic institution. And the for-profit company was everything we saw today, right? Everything from research or research adjacent, et cetera. There's also about 10% that work at the government, 3% that work at a nonprofit, and then a whole bunch of little tiny ones that have gone on to different sectors. Great, Lori, that's fine. What about it? The data show that of these 1,100 postdocs, and these was actually folks who had gone around the world. So it was not just folks who had stayed in the United States, but also folks who had gone back home and abroad. About 24% of this alumni data is in the tenure or the tenure track. What I really love about this particular number, the 24%, is that it matches everything else that's being seen in the national data. So remember that national data from the survey of earned doctorates that I showed you a couple of slides ago, it was about 26%. So 24% matches really, really well. When I did this for my alumni from the big alumni database, the number was the same. When you did it from the biomedical workforce report, that number was the same. So it's consistent that about 25% of us, plus or minus, will probably go on to tenure or tenure track. The rest of us are doing stuff like all the rest of the careers that are out there. So that's kind of like the professional staff. We use this category. I don't know why we did this catch-all one, but basically 56% of us are doing non-tenure track stuff, management, non-tenure track faculty, etc. So people are doing all kinds of other things. So let's dive deeper into that. What are they doing? The categories are things such as, remember, this now can be even someone who's tenure track or a faculty member or non-faculty member. But we're really seeing that folks are doing jobs all over the place, right? Primarily basic research, applied research. Applied research is typically in industry types of positions, science administration and program management, teaching, regulatory affairs, consulting, science writing, clinical practice, bioinformatics and computation and data science, clinical research, everything else. And so it's just such a nice data source to show us that people are going everywhere. So that's why we created the Career Symposium and the breadth of career choices for you to really come into as a way for you to really see all these job categories that you can actually participate in. So I just really like data. So what is the current state of job hunting? Knowing that all of us are not going to be faculty. So let's talk a little bit about nonprofits, government, industry, and academics. And then we got our information from a bunch of different sources. We asked our speakers, again, you can go look at that document that I posted into Whova. But we also looked at a bunch of national data sources, the AAMC, which is the American Association of Medical Colleges, the Chronicle of Higher Education, Science, Nature, GeneCoda, etc. We did a lot of looking at data for lots of different places. So this comes from our speaker predictions. This is their hiring crystal ball. So we asked them in the next cycle, or in the cycle, kind of like the one we're kind of in and going future, do they predict an increase in hiring, no change, or a decrease in hiring? Okay, so we asked them those three questions. Overwhelmingly, hiring is thought to be pretty robust in the next year and going forward. Almost all of our speakers said that hiring is either going to be about the same or increased going forward. Now, that said, if we dive into this data a little bit harder, if you take it down by sector, so I did faculty, industry, I should have put this one over, academics, non-faculty, for the love of science, so that's basically anything tomorrow, communications, policy, etc., and government, and then thinking about it, the good news is hiring's happening. I think the bad news for some of us is it's all being driven by non-faculty appointments. Non-faculty is still not as robust as the rest of the different sectors. I think all of us are seeing that, whether anecdotally or personally, but driving force for hiring is in non-faculty ranks. So that's why I'm hoping through the Career Symposium that you're getting exposure to lots of different career jobs. There are faculty jobs out there. We know there are. I have more data on that coming. But the bulk of the hiring, which is also the bulk of where all of us are going, right? Remember, 75% of us are likely going into all of these sectors. So the good news is that hiring is robust in the sectors that we're looking for. All right, so let's take the sectors apart a little bit, dive down a little bit more into the different sectors. The first is nonprofits. So if you want to go into the nonprofit sector, and I'll talk a little bit more about careers in nonprofit in the opening session tomorrow, but in general, they have about normal to no change to strong-ish hiring. They've kind of moved back into status quo from what I can tell, but there is still strong-ish hiring. Really depending on how many retirements and or turnovers they have. One of the things about nonprofits is you really have to understand where the money comes from, and that will help you understand how healthy that organization is. So does it come from membership? Does it come from events? If it came from events and everybody has moved to a virtual platform over the past 2 years, they're hurting for money right now, because you get more money if it's a conference in person than if it's a conference that's virtual. Is it from philanthropy? So how much philanthropy do they do, or investments? And the good thing is the stock market's been pretty good this year compared to last year. And so if their money is coming from investments and endowments, things have gone a little bit better. One of the things we hear from our friends in nonprofit is that, and in general, I worked in a nonprofit before I came to the NIH, so I understand this, is nonprofit staffs are usually much smaller than other types of staff because of funding. And so you tend to wear more hats. And so you do a lot more in a nonprofit because of the fact that your staffs are so small. They have been hindered by the Great Resignation. So nonprofits are still recovering from that. And two really interesting places to look for jobs for nonprofit types positions. One is Idealist. And again, I've put that there, and Indeed.com, of course, and all the individual organizations. What about government? So, I work in the government now. I switched from nonprofit to government, and it's a very interesting switch, if I have to be honest. One of the things that definitely has come out from all of our speakers who are in the government sector who responded to our survey is how strong hiring has been in the federal sector. Someone mentioned in the survey that we took that it was the best hiring that they've ever seen in the entire time they've worked in the federal government. There are both federal positions and contractors that are available. I recommend that if you're more interested in all the different options within the federal government, join me on May 31st. So coming up on May 31st, I'll have a talk and I'll record it. It'll be on our OITE YouTube page. I'm going to do a talk about careers in the government for scientists. You can also look on our careers blog. We have a lot of posts specifically there on what the difference between a contractor and a federal employee is, and what contractors actually work specifically with NIH and other types of places. So you can kind of get a little bit more information on that. And then where you find the jobs is usajobs.gov, agency websites, and contractor websites. Now, the awesome news. Industry hiring has been at an all-time high. It never slowed down during the pandemic. It really didn't. They just kept hiring like gangbusters. Science has never seen this kind of hiring. We do not see a bubble in the near future coming. We just don't. I know people are starting to talk about bubbles in various different sectors. We haven't seen it come down the pike yet. And right now they're all just rumors. But hiring has been at an all-time high. So I think it's cool. Yay, go industry. I think part of the reason it's so high is that science has become so hot in the United States, right? You wouldn't know that sometimes if we looked at the news, but how fast we moved vaccine technology, how fast we're changing in cancer immunotherapies and stuff like that. That's the reason that industry hiring is so high, is that science is moving really fast at the moment, and they're hiring to keep up with the science. When we look at the different geographies around, and I'm just looking at the United States, I haven't looked around the world. I hope some of you hopped into some of the industry sessions today where there were people from, I know I had a lot of European people today, speakers from Europe, so I hope you had a chance to talk with them. But in the United States, our traditional biotech clusters are still going strong. Boston, the Bay Area, so San Francisco, followed closely by Maryland. Maryland is a hotbed for science. Research Triangle Park, it's just really interesting. This is in North Carolina, really close to our facility down at NIEHS. I have seen a huge turnaround. Back when I started at the NIH 15 years ago, it was crazy down there, the number of companies. Then during the 2008 downturn, it took a hard turn, and I'm finally starting to see companies come back to that area. New York City and New Jersey, San Diego, Orange County, which is LA, in Seattle. Seattle is really picking up. Seattle's interesting because it not only is picking up from industry side, but there's some interesting nonprofits that look like industry or look like academics that are starting to go to Seattle, and they're just an interesting mix of different types of organizations that doesn't exist in other localities. We're kind of seeing that Texas is starting to build a biotech cluster. Houston and Austin, we can see things coming there. But that's really where most of the jobs are. Chicago, a little bit. That's where AbbVie is. And there's another one out there. But it's coming, but they're not as strong as these other biotech clusters. When we look at specialties, scientific specialties, and remember, I'm from the NIH, so if you are an analytical chemist, I don't know you, I'm sorry, but I know the biomedical science. So oncology is hot right now, especially immuno-oncology, infectious diseases and vaccine technology, cell therapy, gene therapy is hot, neurodegenerative diseases is hot, and also ophthalmology, macular degeneration. One of the ways to really kind of think about what is hot in the market is to see what's being advertised. So whether that's from your television, your social media, or in print magazines, or in the newspaper or things like that, it's really like there's all like Keytruda, for example, is always in the back of my magazines. So when you're starting to think about companies, start looking at what's being publicized. And so like right now, if you watch television, it's all about psoriasis drugs, macular degeneration drugs, and things like that. So just put your ear open a little bit different, and you can see where current trends are in science and industry. It's a little bit delayed, right? So because by the time you make it through FDA and get the commercial out, your science has moved on. But it is a nice way to see who's actually probably making money. If you can afford commercials, you're making money. We have seen industry compensation go up over the past year at about 5 to 10% from last year. The market is hot in industry, and so compensation is going accordingly. In Maryland, for someone with a PhD coming into their jobs, what we're seeing in our office is about $110,000 to $120,000 for a PhD level scientist going into industry. There's two areas we know that are paying more. One is Boston, and we're seeing about 115 to over 125. The reason that is they're competing for talent. There are so many companies in the Boston area, and they're poaching from each other, that they tend to pay a little bit better, even for the same work as if you were here in Maryland. The Bay Area, so San Francisco, also has a higher salary load. And the reason we see that is really, it's just cost of living. The cost of living in San Francisco is, and so they're paying you accordingly. The other thing that we are seeing in our office and across all postdoc and career services is that the number of you, PhD candidates and postdocs who are going into industry, who are getting multiple offers, is like nothing we have ever seen. And I've been doing this for 15 years. So I have seen more of you being able to have fantastic offers because the competition for talent is so high. If you're really thinking about what employers are looking for as you're going into industry, they're really looking for these particular 14 things, as well as they added last year during the pandemic, autonomy, people who are self-starters and take initiative. The one thing you don't see on this list is science skills. They expect that you're going to have that. They want you to have all the rest of these things in order to really be a successful candidate for their positions. Industry job ads, where do you find the jobs in industry? Of course, company websites, that's phenomenal. LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed, Simply Hired, Biopharma Guy, I don't know that one, I haven't tested it. My postdocs have told me that lab biotech in Europe is really good. And talking to speakers. You should be networking with speakers, especially for industry jobs. Industry is interesting because if you make a connection with a speaker or with somebody who is in industry, and eventually you make that relationship and they refer you for that job. If you get hired and you stay, they likely will get money for your hire as kind of like an internal headhunter cost. So never, ever feel bad asking somebody in industry if they want to make a connection and then if they would refer you. All right, let's then switch from industry into looking at academic faculty hiring, specifically faculty hiring. Now, during the pandemic, so last year when I gave this talk, the data was really robust. The AAMC had done an amazing job looking at what was happening in the faculty ranks. Interestingly, no one kept the data up this year. I cannot believe it that no one looked for the data. But we do know some things, even without hardcore data. It definitely seems to be faculty hiring is thawing from the great 2020 for 2021 freeze, right? So last year, the last cycle, not the current cycle we're in, but the cycle during the hardcore part of the pandemic, almost every single faculty hire was frozen. And so we lost an entire year of faculty hires really last year. Now, some things that we know are happening based on what we're hearing is that even though the hiring has kind of reopened, some of the positions are actually being filled by people that they interviewed before the pandemic started. So you're never going to see those positions. A lot of people have told us that there is an incredible number of faculty that are retiring. They've kind of gotten through the pandemic-ish, through the pandemic, and they've decided that it's time for them to retire. So they're doing a lot of backfilling of retirement positions, but there may not be a ton of new positions that are opening. One of the reasons that is that there is still a lot of uncertainty in the academic market about student enrollments. You all probably have followed the information that says that student enrollments is going down across the board at universities and colleges. That means without student enrollment dollars, there's less money to do faculty hires. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 4 or 5 years around student enrollment and faculty hires, but it's not all of them, but it definitely has hindered a few faculty searches that are out there. One of the things that has helped faculty, has been good for faculty hiring over the past year, is these NSF and NIH IDEA grants. They're infrastructure grants, kind of built out of stimulus-y kind of money. Those have really helped create salary lines that people are using to hire on faculty at their institutions. All right, the sample size is very small, but the one thing that I've kind of wanted to point out is we asked the speakers, okay, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and post-pandemic, what's happening? And they answered as 2 different levels. Department level, so I'm from the Department of Biochemistry and this is what I think is happening, or I'm talking from the institution level. So what we're really kind of seeing here is that right now, pandemic hiring has kind of gone back to what it was like before the pandemic hit. So I'm going to call this mid-pandemic. I'm not going to say on the behalf of the NIH that we're out of the pandemic. No way, right? So kind of mid-pandemic, we're kind of seeing it go back to where it was pre-pandemic. Now, here's one thing that worries me as someone who helps postdocs get jobs, is that this number here is the same as this number here, but we lost an entire year here. What I worry about is that all the people that would have applied for a position in this area, in this pandemic era, now are in this one. And so we have 2 years of postdocs for 1 year's worth of jobs. We don't know what's going to happen in the next cycle, the 2022-2023. I asked the speakers, but the data wasn't clear. So I'm hoping it starts to really get better for all of you, but I know that many of you, this is a huge stress for a lot of us, this faculty hiring data. So how do you navigate this market? One way is to really understand the breadth of the different types of universities and colleges that are out there and be open to new opportunities. So go back to that talk from yesterday on Academic 101 and kind of really think about where else could you go? I've had a lot of postdocs taking positions at universities that weren't their top choice, but they made them an offer they just couldn't refuse. The other thing is to make sure that you're writing amazingly good quality applications, having lots of people read it before you send it to make sure that it's crystal clear. These two smaller print things came directly from quotes from our speakers, and they're definitely saying that, hiring committees, they're small. They're not very many people on hiring committees, and they have to read a lot of material. So you need to make it as crystal clear as you can so that they actually move you from into the pile for an interview, right? They get such a large pool of people who are applying for the job ads. You want to make sure that your talk stands out. Make sure you're ready. I posted this yesterday, and I still really love this particular resource, the UCSF Academic Career Readiness Assessment. It's just a phenomenal resource out there for those of you thinking about faculty positions. And be resilient. And reach out to your postdoc offices when you need help and when you need an extra hand. So reach out to me if you're at the NIH, and if not, reach out to your postdoc offices. We all know that academic job ads are from journals, professional societies, institutional job boards, but also don't forget your network. Hey, I'm on the job market. Here's my thing. Academics are not immune to networking. We're thinking about remote work, and I know some of you are thinking about long-term remote work. It's unclear yet exactly what that's going to look like. We have definitely seen an increase in job categories that will allow for full-time remote work, but it's not 100%, I think, where everybody wants it to be yet. We definitely see the communications, the medical science liaisons, policy, etc., are seeing a lot more grants, especially from the nonprofit sector, definitely are more remote work, but it's not 100% sure. And if you want to do research, or clinical work, you may have maybe 50-50 telework to in-person work, but we're not 100% sure where this is going to go yet. And I don't think industry has fully wrestled for it. This is a really good question, though, for many of you who are interested in this, to talk with the speakers about the future of remote work in their organizations. Now, that's all the data that I have. Now, how do you become and make sure that you're competitive? I really, really think that networking is the key. And one of the things a lot of the OIT staff and I were talking about during the day today was that how many of you were in rooms and going, well, I don't even know where to start with networking. And I'm like, you're in a room with a speaker, that's networking. It's not this magic potion. I think instead, think about it like a data collection project. And if we break it down to more science terms, sometimes that makes it a little easier. What type of data do you need to collect? Okay, so what type of data do you want? And then use Excel to start thinking about building what data you need to make the decision. Your network really just needs a seed crystal, right? It just needs a little bit to get going. Remember back in organic chemistry, you put a little bit in and then poof, that's all you need. So start small and your network will grow. And there's a really good video on our YouTube page about how to build your network. The big thing about it is really informational interviewing, talking to someone. And in the protocol for an informational interview is really about 4 things. First is present. Tell me about your job. What do you love? What do you hate? What do you wish you could change? What are on your to-do list, both long-term and short-term projects, etc. Past is number 2. How did you get into this field? What did you do to make yourself a competitive candidate? Who did you network with? 3, future. Where do you see yourself going? Where do you see the field going? Where do you see your organization going? And then 4th, advice. Who else should you talk to? What professional societies should you join, etc. We have another YouTube video specifically on informational interviewing for you to go back to and with a little bit more in depth than what I just gave you. When you think about applying for jobs, how do most of you get jobs? Okay, so the first is using the network that you're forming. We think that about 90% of you are getting jobs through networking and kind of like those informal interactions. The good thing about that is it helps you tap into the underground job network. And then sometimes people will let you know that there's a job opening when they have one. All right, so 90% is probably a little high, but okay, you get where I'm going. Networking is king. Online applications, we're seeing about 20 to 30% of that being hit. You'll likely have to do this even if you're networking. One other thing about online applications that drives you all nuts is it might ask you for a salary. You do have to put something usually. It's usually one of those fields you can't leave blank. Your network, if you ask your network, hey, what's a typical starting salary for this type of job? You probably can get that. You can also use Glassdoor and things like that. Career fairs, okay, I don't run career fairs because less than 1% of the people who attend a career fair will actually get a job from a career fair. They are a nice place to go find companies you might be interested in who do the types of science that you're interested in, long-term kind of start building relationships, but they are a crummy place to get a job. Now, recruiters. Recruiters are very interesting. There are two types of recruiters that are actually out there. The first is one who is really like a headhunter who's looking to place you someplace. They don't work very often with people like postdocs. They just don't. You don't make enough money for them because that's how they get paid. That said, you may be getting a lot of recruiter things from LinkedIn. When you get those types of things, they're likely talking to about 5 or 6 people at a time, presenting those 5 or 6 people to the company, hoping one of them will get the job. The problem is, most of the time, they're telling all of you you're the best candidate. So don't rely on recruiters to get you a job. You have to have like the full spectrum of what you're doing here. You definitely have to prepare your documents. There's a lot of stuff on the OITE website. This is a YouTube on how to make a resumes, cover letters, etc. This is from our website and where we have a bunch of documents. You need to know how to do interviews, both Zoom interviews and non-Zoom interviews, practicing typical questions. I run a job search group for industry people at the NIH, and we meet every other week. And a couple of weeks ago, their homework was just practice with each other the tell me about yourself question. And they came back the next week and they're like, oh, that was a lot harder than we thought it was going to be. We thought it would be really easy, but when we started opening our mouths, like it made it difficult. And so practicing those is really super, super important. Create a group, create a friend group, and work on this together. This is not easy. I remember when I was a postdoc and I left and I went to the nonprofit and then coming here, it takes so much time to find a job. And you're making each application try to match the job ad, and you still have to do your research and your science at the same time. And it's hard to balance those. The other thing, it's kind of disheartening, right? You don't hear back. Oh, it makes me nuts, right? You send your application in and you never hear from it again. And so you don't have any information about it. And for some of us, at least for me, this is the first time I ever applied for a real job. Right? When I went to graduate school, I understood how that worked and I got to pick. When I did my postdoc, I could kind of pick where I wanted to go and who I wanted to work with. They weren't all going to say yes, but I at least had a pretty good chance. And then I went to my first real job and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so different. And so for some of us, it might be the first time we've applied for a real job. So I really recommend building resilience. And there's a pretty good video on that on the OITE website. There's also another good video, a second video that I didn't post here from last year's about sunk cost fallacies and stuff like that. Again, all on the OITE website. So making sure that as you go through this, you're taking care of yourself, being resilient, taking care of your mental health needs. It's tough. So take care of yourself during this process. Many of you are international applicants. You need visas, and that is really challenging. So the first about international applications is to really understand the process and the options. What options of visas there are out there, and what is the process, and how likely is it? You should understand the different types of H-1Bs that are out there, whether they are cap unlimited, such as academics, institutions, or CAP subject, which is be any industry institution. That means it really influences how and when you apply. So for example, if you want to go into industry jobs and you need an H-1B, you should definitely be applying in the first quarter of the year to make sure you can hop into the visa lottery as in April. Otherwise, there's no visas left. It is very difficult. I will not be answering any additional questions on visa applicants, so I can see the numbers starting to go. I don't have the information. Furthermore, as a federal government employee, I can't give you a ton of information. That said, I want to point out a couple of really great resources. United States Citizen and Immigration Services. I really recommend that you connect with your own visa offices for the things that are important to you, or an immigration attorney. And then there's also this website, myvisajobs.com. It's a great resource. You can even see who has sponsored H-1Bs for the different types of sectors that are out there. Unfortunately, I haven't seen anyone post like who sponsors O visas and stuff like that, but myvisajobs.com does post who does sponsor H visas. So as we kind of wrap up here, I have some tips. Start early. It takes a long time. On average, about one month for every $10,000 you want to make. So usually about 9 to 10 months. And if it's an academic position, it's at least a year. Network with everybody. I can't say that enough. Tailor your documents for job filters, and be a perfectionist. Tiny errors will weed you out. Spelling errors could weed you out. Little things. People don't have time to show that. You do not need to be a perfectionist, though, about the types of jobs you apply to. If you have 70-ish% of what the job is asked for, go for it. If it says 5 years of industry experience, I don't care. Go for it. Don't be so picky in reading them quite so hard. If you do network, awesome. Always send a thank you as a follow-up. Use LinkedIn. We have a couple of things on LinkedIn on our YouTube page. Be professional. And I've noticed on the community boards how professional everyone has been. And so it makes me really, really happy. Don't take rejections personally. You can't. It's going to hurt too much. Brush yourself off and apply again. And do something small for your job search every day. Job search paralysis is real. It's not very much fun. So it can happen at any time. So realize that just do something small every single day. There's lots of resources on our YouTube page, resumes, cover letters, CVs, etc. We have a couple of guides here that are really good on how to build a resume, interview, network, and skills. I really recommend you also reach out to your postdoc offices and grad offices that you have around the country, because each one of them is a wealth of information about all of this as well. Your homework is to continue your network. Start a conversation with the speaker, a quick email, a thank you, maybe something that was discussed, a follow-up. Remember, if you don't get a response, don't be annoyed. Follow up with them. Try to get their email address, perhaps, in case they're not using the Whova app as strong. Not all of them are as savvy on Whova as others. You can contact them again after 1 to 2 weeks if you don't hear from them. But I want you to go connect with at least one person. So that's the talk I have for you. Lots more resources here. Let me open up the Q&A here and see what we got. All right. Oh, this is a great question. Does the length of time differ by job type? Oh my gosh, yes. Industry can go really, really, really fast. Government will take forever, like 6 months before you even hear anything. So yes, it absolutely does. And that's not easy because you can't really plan around it as well. So a lot of people will look in different sectors all at the same time. Now, someone's asked about, does the federal government accept international students? For long-term federal employment, so something you would find on usajobs.gov, probably not. You need to be a citizen. Even a green card holder is usually not good enough. You can try the contracting firms, and there's some other ways that you can get in the door. We'll talk more about that on May 9th. I'm sorry, May 31st. It's too hard to answer the question about what types of visas the government will sponsor because it really depends on where you're at and what type of position. This is a great question. Do you talk about those 14 things, those 9 science skills on a resume survey or in an interview? I think it's a little bit of both. I think the really think a thing to know about that is that, oh crud, I lost the question. The 14 things. If it's something that the job ad has asked for, you really want to make sure that you put it there. But for the most part, most of that's probably going to be asked in an interview. How easy, we talked a little bit about how easy and difficult how difficult it is to be to go into industry as an international. When the government shuts down, do employees and contractors get paid retroactively? It just depends. There's no guarantee. We always have been, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen. All right, so we talked a little bit about those 14 soft skills and that sometimes they need a good thing to do is to really kind of think about your resume as a way to highlight who you are. So if there's something in those soft skills that make it who you are, those 14 skills, then yeah, pop that in there. Okay, so Kelsey's asked a really good one about research and teaching focused jobs. For the most part, I couldn't get data that really separated them out. They both seem okay. One of the things that I'm seeing at the smaller institutions, though, is student enrollment becomes more influential into faculty hires at smaller schools than schools that are much more grant focused. We don't know anything about how the tech industry layoffs are going to spill over. We have no idea. And the tech industry is just weird. They're not quite the biotech industry, the pharma, the science side of the house. And science with immunotherapies, vaccine technologies, and just how fast drug development is moving now. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did, if that is. I haven't seen a lot of layoffs in biotech yet. Not yet. They're always happening someplace, but not like ones that were hitting the news. Oh, someone's asked if I put a 0 or 1 instead of a number in the salary, they can talk to the manager later. That's an interesting trick. You also may not get a call because you didn't take the application seriously. So do your best to try to put a number there. If it's really far off, but you're still a great candidate, they'll probably still give you a call. So how much should you allocate to job hunting during work hours? At the NIH, we recommend 5% of your time. Now, that said, it's going to ebb and flow depending on where you are. So sometimes it may be a lot, like 20 or 30%, and sometimes it may be a little. It just is going to ebb and flow based on where you're at. How much do you need to tailor your resume? A lot. Absolutely a lot. Watch the videos that we have on CVs and resumes, and that will really help. If you don't have time and you really want the quickest way to do it, make sure that the summary of qualifications at the very top match the job ad. Are resumes more common for industry jobs and CVs for academics? Absolutely, right? So honestly, the only time you're going to use a traditional CV is if it's for an academic type position. Even for research support positions, academic support positions, they're likely looking for a resume, even if they ask for a CV. The resumes really are a way to highlight why you fit that job ad. My thoughts on applying to jobs from different fields. I've talked to some recent graduates who regret having applied to many job opportunities, but you can cast as wide a net as you are. Remember, this is you. That's their regrets. You take your own. If you really want a wide sector, go for it. Like if you have lots of different interests, you're not sure which one, you can apply to as many as you want. I don't know which sectors seem to be more virtual friendly. We just don't know that yet. I don't have the data there. So when listing a salary in a job applications, should I go for the high side, the low side, the average? Do the average, as close as you can get to the average. How should I explain unemployed period that happened during my job interviews? Just be honest and say, I was unemployed for a little bit. The job market took a turn. I'm really willing and ready to get back into the job market. And here's what I've done to prepare myself. If a cover letter is not required, should you include one? No. Don't waste your time. Should you apply for industry positions even if you're not sure? Sure, why not? Go check them out. If you don't like it, when you interview, tell them thank you very much, have a nice day. How accurate are salary figures from Glassdoor? Close, but not 100%. They are, as you said, they're self-reported. And additionally, you're right that they're accumulative. They can be old and new data. So you kind of have to see when people have put it in there. What I've found is they're pretty close. Glassdoor's pretty close. It's usually maybe like 5 to 10% off, but no more than that from what I've seen. All right. If I'm applying for a green card, do companies hire with an EAD or do they prefer the actual green card? I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry, I'm not a visa expert. For people who have been in a postdoc for a long time, can I still move to industry? Absolutely. You can convince them that, yes, I've been in academics for a while, but here's what I've done to prepare myself for an industry position and the types of people that I networked with and why I think this is so awesome. I'm not going to talk about grant writing opportunities for faculty in the NIH intramural research because most faculty at NIH do not write grants. If we're wrapping up a PhD, we may be forced with balancing an academic postdoc search with a flexible start date and an industry scientist search that has a hard date. How do you balance those? Oh, I wish I had the answer. I wish I had the magic wand for this particular question. It's really tough because like my defense was a whole year later than I wanted it and hoped it would be. My postdoc advisor waited for a year as we kept pushing back my defense date. I can't imagine a company doing the same thing. So maybe you could stay on as a postdoc in the lab you're currently in, or maybe you have to take a buffer position, or maybe you and your boss negotiate that your PI negotiate that you'll be looking for an industry job, and how are you going to finish both things? All right, for faculty positions, how successful are candidates that contact department chairs versus applying for job postings? That's a good question, Brian, and I don't know the answer to it. And I think it really depends on the institution and how happy those departmental chairs are to get all those emails. And I can't say yes or no. When should you tell your postdoc advisor that you're looking for a position outside of academia? During the application process, this really depends on the relationship you have with your advisor. My boss knew from the point at which I joined her lab because I never wanted to be a principal investigator. I know a lot of people also who don't ever want to tell and don't tell. So it's everything in between. This is a really good question to talk to your mentors about, not your PI, but your other mentors or your postdoc office or your grad program. The reason I say that is it's nice for them to connect with you, and they know your bosses and they can help you kind of like strategize that. And because each one of you, it's going to be so individualistic. All right. I'm currently an early postdoc, yay, and hoping to transition to industry, super yay. I wonder if it makes sense to continue my postdoc until I get a better research portfolio. Meh, maybe. If you find an industry job and they're ready to hire you, have a good time. Go get a real job. Has growth in pharma use of, I don't know what CDMOs is. I don't know the answer to that, Ian, because I don't know what it means. I finished my postdoc contract 3 months ago and I'm still in the job search. That is fine. Don't worry about it. Say, you know what, my postdoc contract ended and I'm looking for a new position. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about a small gap. Is it required to tell hiring companies of other offers? Nope, you don't have to tell them. You do have to have a visa if you are an international. So a green card or an industry H-1B or other types of visas. There's other visas that are out there. Be careful on visa advice. I've been watching the community boards. Be careful. One person's experience may not be your experience. And if you really want good advice, find yourself a good immigration attorney. How do you show self-confidence? I think that definitely comes out more in an interview. So in an interview, you can show self-confidence by how you answer a question, how you tell stories about things that have happened in the past. And again, your career center, your postdoc office, and your grad program can all help you prepare for those interviews. I don't know about medicinal chemistry. I just don't, but I imagine it's very, very similar, that it's a hot topic right now. If I do have a green card, should I highlight that in my resume? Yep, put it at the top. What are the best ways to find a company or organization that aligns with your values? That's a more difficult one. Yes, it's a perfect question to ask in informational interviews. That's one thing last week where I was talking to a speaker who was from AstraZeneca and from my job search group. And he was talking about how to align that he turned down a job because it didn't align with his values. So yeah, that's a great question for informational interviews, as well as every single company website will really talk about the mission and values of the organization. So it's a great way for you to kind of get the 50,000-foot view. All right. Oh, yeah, the job hunt decimates confidence. Doesn't it, though? It really stinks. This is where finding a good career counselor will help, as well as using your postdoc office. Find some support. Besides just your family. I mean, our family is rock, but sometimes we need a little bit of professional support on this, because you're right, it's really tough. You can ask for feedback from a hiring manager, but you may not get it. You can ask, but you may not get it. If I knew I didn't want to be a PI, why did I do a postdoc? Thank you for asking me that. So I had a very interesting graduate school experience, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't the experience that I was in that made me want to not be a PI. So I was very strategic in choosing my postdoc. I went from a very small lab and a person who didn't get tenure when I was in her group as a graduate student, to somebody who was a National Academy member who had 2 R01s, and it was just rich with people, money, and resources. Yeah, nope. Still wasn't me. I love my job. And so I found the perfect position for me. All right, how to get recommendation letters for a faculty position from different people at different institutions? Just ask them, tell them, give them your CV, tell them what you want them to highlight, those kind of things. Is a hiring timeline for NIH contract positions more similar to government positions or industry positions? They're more similar. Contract positions are much more similar to industry. They go much, much faster. Industries ask for recommendation letters. Typically, industry will make calls. Phone calls, not letters. So contract development and manufacturing organizations. I lost the other part of your question, but I think it was, I think they're working well together. So there's going to be opportunities in both contract organizations, contract research CROs, and the big industries. I haven't seen that one is outpacing the other as of yet. Can you request a secondary faculty appointment in the second department when applying? Sure. Well, not applying. I think I would do it once I got it into my interview and my negotiation. That's when I would do that. How to stay motivated in your current postdoc when we want to know that we want to go into industry? That's a great question. Actually, anything else. How do we stay motivated when I know I want out? Try to make little component progress in making this. So building your network, building your, going and working on a committee that's going to get you exposure to different things. Those kind of things are really important. The NIH payback agreement, please reach out to the people who are in the payback programs. I don't know about student loan reimbursement in industry. I have no idea, nor do I know in faculty. I don't know the answer to that. I already asked that one, answered that one from somebody else. How do you go about asking a hiring manager if the work-life balance is without sounding lazy? Oh, that is a great question. I think a great way to ask that is like, tell me what work-life balance looks like in this organization, right? So if you ask it that way, it's not like, I'm tired of burning the candle at both ends and I want to go home at night, right? So tell me what it looks like is a great way. Okay, 41. I got 2 more questions. This is a great one. When do companies typically hire? Oh, that's a great question. And you are actually absolutely right, Mahmood, that they don't hire a lot in November and December. You'll see a huge decrease in November and December, regardless of what you're going to. look at what the fiscal cycle is for that organization. So like, for example, in the government, our fiscal cycle starts in October. So you'll see hirings come in October after we get that money. The same is true in industry. Typical, the fiscal year starts at the calendar year. So you'll see openings come in the first quarter because they have their budgets for that now. Now, you're right, November and December across the board are really challenging because it's hard to get hiring committees to commit when everybody's going to holiday parties. All right, I'm asking and doing one more, and then I'll have to answer the rest of them later. When's a good time to ask about your partner? That's a good one. That's a really tough one. You know, my husband and I were on the job market at exactly the same time. It was really hard and really challenging for both of us to be. And we had a 1-year-old when we were we had our baby when we were postdocs. He was 1. It was really tough. I did it once it looked really like I was going to have the job offer. I said, okay, this is great. I'm really looking forward to it. I have a partner, I have a husband. What can we do for him? Some companies and organizations are phenomenal. Mine wasn't so much. When I came to the NIH, it was amazing, but when I moved to my nonprofit, it was all on our own. So don't think it's going to happen, that they're really going to help, but usually about the time where it looks like you're going to be getting an offer. Well, friends, I'm tired. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I know there's some questions that we just didn't have time to get to. I apologize for that. I'll try to get to them either through the Whova app or some other way in the future. This recording will be posted on our YouTube page in about a week at the latest. And you have access to the slides and you have access to that document from the speakers. Thank you for joining us. Tomorrow we'll start again at 11 a.m. on For the Love of Science, different careers in policy, government, nonprofits, etc. So thanks for joining us and enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.